All right. Let's bang, Tui. What's up, everybody? Let me, I don't have my glasses on yet. How are you doing? How are you? It is the 10th of April, 2025. My name is Luke Thomas. It is time for episode 249 of my live chat. Thank you so much for joining me. I greatly appreciate it here on this Thursday. Boy, there is no shortage of topics to get to today. Of course, on the weekend, finally, a phenomenal UFC event awaits us. UFC 314. Any questions about that? Let's get to them. That's up. There's been, if no one asks about it, I'm just going to make a separate video about it. I thought it might come up today, so I didn't know if it made sense to make another one ahead of time, but Ali Act, there is a monster update, and I think it's really worth talking about, so we'll get to that if there is interest. If not, I'll just make a separate video. The GFL, I mean, like, I take great pride in the fact that we never gave on this program or any program I'm affiliated with. We never took them seriously for a fucking second. I take great pride in that. So we can talk about whatever happened to them here if you want to as well. Really, whatever is on your mind, we'll do that. So I put up a post yesterday. You guys fill it up on the posts section here at youtube.com/Luke Thomas. We'll go for about an hour on that, and then we'll get to the paid portion. You can fire in a donation, and we'll put your question on the screen. The one exception to that is if you're a member, you can do that for free. If you have any issue with getting that picked up for whatever reason and you're concerned that it may not, and you're a member, tag my buddy Othello, who is here watching with us. He'll make sure that gets sorted. Okay. Housekeeping note. We'll put this up a little bit later. If you haven't already, there we go. Scan that QR code. That's for my Substack. We're going to do a bunch of fun stuff. Tomorrow on my Substack, probably at around noon or 1, I'm still trying to figure out the time, we're going to do the Fight Day broadcast. And that'll be 100% behind a paywall. If you don't pay, you don't get access to it. But we're going to watch a couple of the fights to get ready for UFC 314 together. Now, normally I would do that on a Wednesday, not a Friday, but we had the weird MK on the Wednesday, so I wasn't really able to. But going forward, that's probably going to be a Wednesday piece of programming. But in any case, we're going to do that tomorrow. So go ahead and scan that if you want to be a member of the channel, which, by the way, you get the chat functionality. You get all kinds of different stuff. But the Fight Day broadcasts are going to be absolutely exclusive to that. There's no other place that they will air. They will only air on Substack. So if you want to, let's do this. Yes, like right there. Yeah, that's better. That's easier. Right there. Right there. Okay, go ahead and give that a scan. All right. That's it for the housekeeping notes. Without further ado, let's get this party started, shall we? Oh, and I forgot to mention, it's been a while since we've done one. I haven't done one in quite some time. Saturday, we're going to get right back to it. Watch along for UFC 314, and that's going to go right into the post-fight show. Very excited about it. I fucking love doing those post-fight shows when there's a lot of meat on the bone, and there's so much to get to, and there's so many interesting things, and that card is filled with it. So I'm pumped. I'm super pumped for UFC 314, and I'm pumped to do the watch along with you guys, and I'm pumped to do that post-fight show. If I can be honest, I do like doing the watch along. The watch along is actually a lot of fun, but my favorite thing is still that post-fight show. The post-fight show might be like, MK is probably one of the most important things that I do, but like on this channel, maybe my number one thing in terms of the most fun that I have is a post-fight show. I fucking love the post-fight show. I love that's to me my number one thing, to be honest with you. I mean, this chat is great too. I mean, that's up there, but I've been waiting for a good post-fight show, or a post-fight opportunity, I should say. Been a little quiet on the boxing front, been a little quiet on the MMA front, but here we go. 314, we're back. So join me on Saturday for that. Should be a grand old time. All right. Okay. Well, no time like the present. Let's get this going. Let's pull up these questions and see what we can do for you this way. Hold on one second. Let me get this going in the back. There we are. Let's do it that way. Oops. No, sorry. Hold on. Like that. Okay. Can you see? Yes, you can. All right. Hey, Luke. Yeah. Bob Arum recently stated he'd be willing to join forces with PBC to counter this new upcoming boxing league by Dana and Turki. Do you think Dana and Turki made this announcement too soon, and it has given enough time to promoters for introspection, co-promoting different fights and making the best fights the fans want to see? Or is it just a vain effort to delay the inevitable? I mean, I kind of want to split the difference on this one. My understanding is I've heard some rumblings that that announcement by Turkey was hastened and it went out not prematurely in the sense that they, it was some sort of leak or something, but that they didn't necessarily need to announce at that time. It was more a strategic thing. I hate spreading rumors, so I don't really want to, I can just tell you what I've heard. And what I've heard was that, it may be related to that. I can tell you one thing that's kind of interesting behind the scenes. It's going a little bit unnoticed. Jake Paul is trying to raise a bunch of money. I don't know what for, but as I understand it, it's a lot of money. And so that means he's probably trying to make some kind of a purchase. Hard to say exactly what that would be, but something to keep an eye on there. Whatever the case, I don't know if they're related or not. I mean, I'm sort of putting two different things and suggesting there's a relationship, and there may not be one. I want to be clear about that. But my understanding was that it didn't need to, that event, for whatever the purposes of doing it at that time, it didn't need to be. And I do think it has forced some introspection. If you're PBC and you're top rank and you're looking around and you want to mount an effort against what's coming, you have to work together. You cannot make it on your own without it, right? If you're going to make the best fights possible, particularly for the American public, obviously they have international lists of fighters, their rosters. But if you're trying to make the best fights for, either the American market, the North American market, and when I say that, obviously Mexican-American audiences, to an extent Canadian audiences as well, you have to work together. There really can be no other way. I just don't see how survival is possible without it. At the same time, it all kind of feels a little late for me, so on the one hand, I do think that a lot of promoters got spooked by that. I think the biggest thing to me was not so much that Top Rank and PBC were kind of spooked into working together, although that's maybe a little bit. The interesting part to me was like, a lot of these other promoters seem to have been caught off guard by Turkey's comments about like, oh, there's only going to be one and we're going to crush him with TKO. And it's like, you could see Eddie Hearn was like, okay, all right. And I think De La Hoya has been quiet about it, but has recognized the limits of what he's going to face here. I mean, they did a Latino night in Saudi Arabia. I have a feeling they won't be doing one of those in 2027, not with him anyway. So, that kind of a thing. So I've definitely, it did seem, what you have noticed is right. It did spark some reactions, but at the same time, it feels like the fact that, TKO and Turkey are getting into the game is kind of evidence that it might be too late. I mean, that's, they picked, I think, a very available target, and trying to shore it up now before they can really get into the space, maybe that'll work. Maybe. But I kind of wonder if years and years and years of laying the groundwork for this has made, PBC and Top Rank are going to work together. That's going to stop everything. And I'm like, it could. It could certainly slow or delay or make things difficult, and maybe it will stop them altogether. But I don't know. Boxing is never early, always late. Yeah. Okay, let's see. Okay, now we can read. All right. Okay, as an audio-only listener due to listening while at work, I've noticed you have this tendency where you'll finish reading a question in your head before you finish reading it out loud, and will proceed to react to the question and answer it without ever completely reading it out loud. It tends to lead to a lot of confusion and trying to piece together what the question was actually asking with context clues, and hoping I fully understand what you're giving an answer to. I know it's not technically a question, but I just wanted to let you know about that in case you were unaware how it affects audio-only listeners. Keep up the good work. Thanks for reading. Yes, it is something I've tried to work on. I think I've gotten a little bit better about it, but clearly there's significant and further room for improvement. I appreciate the heads up. I'll keep that in mind. I will try to make sure I read the full question before we get to anything else. Okay? Thank you for your patience. Oh, here we go. Thank you, Jesus. Let's do this. I can't wait to sink my teeth into this topic. Have any thoughts on Global Fight League canceling events and possibly being DOA? Yeah, plenty. Vaporware FC. Vaporware. You don't know what vaporware is, Google it. I've never seen bigger vaporware in my entire life than I have, well, in MMA anyway, than I have with GFL. I mean, dude, I cannot wrap my head around how this ever got any oxygen at all for an idea so cockamamie, for a project so untrustworthy, with a business plan that could not possibly have worked. Why there was 5 seconds of attention paid to these fucking jamokes blows my mind. How could anybody, unless I mean, okay, if you don't know anything about combat sports and you don't know anything about MMA, I can understand how potentially their pitch might, at least on some level, seem to you like, all right, let's hear him out. Maybe something will happen here. And of course, life is funny and full of interesting surprises. Could they catch some lifeline between now and whenever they, ultimately go under that gives them a little bit of a life, before they reach their inevitable conclusion? It's possible, right? I mean, you never could rule it out. But I mean, this was not a difficult call. This was not a difficult call. I always make this point. People sometimes ask me, like, you've heard me say this before, but it's worth using as a example. Folks have asked me, like, oh, how'd you know Khabib was going to be so good? And I always, like, I remember I got asked this on a sports radio interview one time, and I was like, it wasn't hard to figure out. You know what I mean? Like, okay, did you know he was going to be as good as he was? All right. I mean, maybe some of that was hard to, like, figure out, but you could just tell he was manhandling these guys. Like, it wasn't very difficult to know that there was something special going on with him. And the inverse is true, where you just see an idea coming, this jalopy coming down the street with the bumpers dragging on the ground and sparks are flying. There's no front headlight on one side of the car. The windshield wiper has a blade that's now marking the windshield. The window doesn't roll up properly. The back door has to be shut with duct tape. It's like, yeah, this car's not going to win a race. It's not hard to tell. It's not hard to tell. Nothing about their pitch made any financial sense. Nothing about their concept made any sense whatsoever. Nothing about the way in which they were approaching this made you believe that this was a financially secure operation. And nothing about the way they acted gave you a sense that this was a professional operation that was destined for some kind of future. And the reality is this, like, I don't see it as some great loss, because to me it never existed. This was just completely, I mean, what would you want? I don't even know what you call it, a media or maybe even just a social media invention. That I mean, again, it's vaporware. There is no there. It doesn't exist. I've just never seen, like, a bubble like this created from nothing, from truly nothing, from absolutely nothing. There's nothing there. It does, you open up the lunchbox, there's no food. There's just no, there has no beginning and it has no end. It's nothing. I couldn't believe people were even, like, and especially people who have been in the, fans who have been in the industry a while, or, and the media is required to be some level of, I'm not going to say obsequious, that's not true, but some level of, you don't want to be too credulous or incredulous. You kind of have to be a little bit somewhere in between. And it just seemed to me like that balance got a little bit messed up, where people were treating this as like something kind of, we're treating this with, some seriousness that deserves to be conferred upon it. Based on what? Based on what? Based on fucking what? Dude, even if they had all the funding that they proclaimed that they would need to succeed, that wasn't going to be enough. That wasn't, dude, I talked to some folks when I was at that XFC event who had, teammates who had GFL contracts promised to them, or coaches, they had mutual coaches, and like the numbers that they were being given made absolutely no fucking sense whatsoever. To say nothing of the fact that if you hire a bunch of like former UFC people who are in their late 30s, early 40s, they're still going to be expensive. Like having all of them on your roster makes absolutely no fucking sense for a brand that nobody knows exists, that has you have no brick and mortar office, you have no office generally, you have no staff, you have no you have nothing. It doesn't exist. There's nothing there. This is a deep cut. You guys won't remember Whamma, but it's like dude, Whamma had offices. Whamma had offices. I have one of their things that hung in their office. I bought it off of eBay. It's an old thing that doesn't matter anymore, but like I should pull it out. I think it's down there in my chest of drawers. Even those motherfuckers had an office. You guys remember the dude who held up a belt when Fedor won an Affliction and the belt was upside down? That was a Whamma belt. It was designed to be the world. I don't know what it even stands for anymore. World Association of Mixed Martial Arts, whatever it stood for. And it was trying to be like the belt of all belts. And it was a cockamamie idea. It was never going to get off the ground without, effective legislation. But neither here nor there. They had an office for a time. Like what the fuck are we even talking about here? Even if they had all that funding and even if they were able to like sell out the arena, they wouldn't have made all their money back. And even with all of that, this team concept is an absolute path to nowhere. It can work in different circumstances in very, very limited doses. It cannot be what your product is. And as I've said on this channel previously, I've watched people try to do team MMA. Motherfuckers, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. And the problem, of course, is much deeper when you don't have access to, when all the best fighters are under one promotion and you're trying to figure out how you can get into the game and make it all work. You have really not much of a choice but to come up with cockamamie ideas. But that doesn't mean we have to confer any legitimacy upon them because, I don't know, you had noble intentions or something. It's a fucking... Like, what are we even doing with any of this? It's a complete hype job from beginning to end. That, again, they might put on a show in June. That's what the current promoter's talking about. They might rally. I don't think that they will. Like, if you're asking me what my bet is that you have seen the end of this whole thing. But, maybe they rescue themselves and they put on a couple of shows. Those are going to lose money like it's a fucking contest. It can't work. It cannot work. Everything we know about what works in combat sports, this has none of it. You don't have funding. You don't have concept. You don't have organization. You just have nothing. You have nothing there. A complete vaporware existence in every possible way. I've just... It's almost like a rug pull, you know what I mean? But like, except nobody got rich, just like everybody got screwed, Like, here's this complete fiction that we're just going to entertain for reasons that remain totally unclear to me. Why? Because you want to see Dylan Dennis fight in MMA? Who the fuck even wants to see that? Like, what the fuck even is the point of that? I mean, talk about a ship being, sailed, and I know that there were some other fighters that I would still have been curious to see, what they could do. Will Brooks would have been curious for me. I talked to a guy who was on that XFC card who I think was part of or could have been drafted. I think they let him go. Saeed Yakub Kakramanov, who was a 2-on-1 vet out of UFC. Good fighter, actually. Really good fighter. I think he was part of it. I think I haven't talked to her about it since, but my color commentary partner, Jessica Aguilar, was drafted by them. I don't know where she stands with all of it, and I know she was training for it too. She took it seriously. So, I mean, I feel bad for the fighters, I really do. And they need a place to go beyond just PFL and whatever's left of what one's MMA ambitions are. Like, they need a place to take it. And I don't really know what the answer to that is or where you're going to go. It's bad for the industry, but Jesus Christ, guys, like, this was a nothing burger you had every reason to doubt them. You had every reason to not take them seriously. You had every reason to be like, why the fuck are we spending months of media cycles talking about these bozos? There's nothing there. I've never seen the bottom of a Christmas tree look more empty than that. Not even stocking stuffers, bro. Nothing. Zero. Nothing. Zip. No hay nada. Like, I can't believe, ¿Dónde está GFL? No está. I mean, there's nothing. There's nothing. let this be a lesson, man. Like I'm saying this. I take great pride that I don't think any of you really ever took. I mean, some of you might have been curious. Hey, I'm hearing a bunch of this. Okay, fine. Kicking the tires on something that is blown up in your face constantly. Fine, a totally human reaction. But I think most of you have been fans for MMA for at least a little while. Most of you have seen promotions try some bullshit stuff, and I think your bullshit detector went off on this, relatively quickly. And certainly on this program and even MK, we might have touched on it a couple of times, but like it was just impossible to take seriously in any kind of way. I take great pride that like I never wasted a moment of mental energy being like, wow, what do these guys really contribute to the MMA space? Taking up oxygen and real estate on people's timelines for a few months to trick them into thinking that something was there that wasn't there. And even if they could make it there, it's the dumbest idea I've ever heard of. Like, even if you get the funding, your ideas are shit. They cannot work. They will not work. It will fail, even if you get to someplace better than where they are now. By the way, according to John Nash, they were asking people to delay being paid after fights to 10 days. Like, who the fuck is going to do that? It's just a total sham. Total sham. I'm not saying that the people behind it didn't believe it, but I'm saying unless you were like tricked or confused or just, like drinking the Kool-Aid in the weeds believer, it's not possible to take them seriously. And I'm so glad I never interviewed the fucking, I mean, just it's just a complete joke. Complete joke. And honestly, the only people I feel bad for are the fighters who were training and taking it seriously. I feel bad for them because it has to suck that you were like, hey, maybe I might get this huge financial windfall, because that does tend to happen in MMA where, a promoter comes in paying way too much, doesn't last long. But hey, if you can catch candy under the piñata for as long as that lasts, you might go home with, something fun to eat. That actually, that happens more than you might imagine. But for everybody else, like, what were you thinking? Just, I mean, the ultimate hype job of absolutely nothingness. If Paddy can get the W this weekend, this person writes, do you think he calls out Gaethje? He might. With Paddy's chin and Gaethje's submission defense, Paddy is a problem. Paddy's chin? Do we think Paddy has a good chin? It just hasn't been cracked properly. A win over Gaethje makes him a big star and puts him right there for a title shot. I think he probably will call for a title shot. I doubt he gets it. I think he might get it. I mean, he might get it. It's hard to say exactly. I don't know if he'll call out Gaethje. He might, but I definitely think he's going to call for a title shot, and I think that might just be enough because it's hard to say what's going to happen with it. We know that Islam Makhachev is waiting to see the results of 315 in case JDM wins, and I think he's going to want that fight up there at 170, which creates a whole new thing. But if he stays, are you really going to give Paddy a title shot off of beating Chandler against Islam Makhachev? Islam will fucking tear him limb from limb. And, dude, I think actually Paddy's going to win this weekend. I do. I've been wrong about Paddy. He's much better than I thought he would be. But even with that, I still am like, okay, I can grant that he's better than I thought he would be. But, like, we still got to have some limits about, some rational observations about where he actually is. He's not beating Islam Makhachev. Not today. Not anytime soon. And I don't know if the UFC really wants to do that anyway. There are some other fights you could make that I think would make a little bit more sense. But if I were him, why would you not call for a title shot? Like I think for him in that position, it would make the most sense. But will he specifically call out Gaethje? That's a little bit harder to say. Honestly, he might want Topuria, which I'd be okay with that. I mean, I think Topuria might wreck him, but okay, Luke, I love the Volk. Excuse me. I love Volk, But the idea of winning a title after getting knocked out twice is special feels like a reach. Okay, so this is in response to the video I made yesterday. The reason it's never happened, and there's only been 6 attempts, is because you shouldn't get a title shot off back-to-back losses, especially knockouts. I know the lightweight fight plus Ilia moving up makes this fair game, but I'm not so sure it's special. Oh, it's special, all right. It's just a set of circumstances that fell his way and a not-so-great featherweight division at the moment. Rebuttal. Okay, fine. Totally wonderful question. You don't think it's relevant. So let me give you the genesis of where it started to give an answer to this. I was looking at his resume and I was trying to piece together, like, are there any historical parallels? What are we looking at here? Anything I could pull out that would be, of reasonable interest. And then I was thinking to myself, I looked at the odds and he's still the favorite, but not a huge one. And of course, we kind of all know what the story is there. There's obviously questions about him. And Lopes, there's certainly a lot of belief, but on watching the tape of Volk performing at his highest, if you get that guy back, it is hard to see a way Diego Lopes wins. But of course, he is much more fragile now, given everything that's happened. At least we presume that he might be. By the way, I don't know if you guys saw this. He told Teofimo Lopes he had a 16-week camp. That dude's been in camp for 4 months. That is a long camp. I don't think he'll get burnout necessarily, but something to pay attention to in any event. But I was looking to myself and I was like, how hard is that to do, to win a title after being stopped or losing twice? And I was like, okay, well, what are the further circumstances? So I went and I looked, and again, the closest I could find was Couture, who did it at UFC 43. He almost did it twice. He has 2 losses in 3 fights and then won a title. But it's the same kind of a thing. He had to change weight classes to do it. So that's what Couture had to do. He loses to Josh Barnett, gets stopped. He loses to Rigo Rodriguez, he gets stopped. He goes down to light heavyweight for the interim title, and he beats Chuck Liddell. Now, Chuck would rematch him 2 times and then KO him both times. But in that first fight, actually one of Randy's, one of the best takedowns he ever gets, this body lock, and he pulls him high, and then slams him flat on his back. It's a fantastic moment. Awesome performance by Randy Couture. Awesome performance. But I was like, how often has this happened? And you're right. It's a very, very small sample size. But the point you raise is because you shouldn't get a title shot off back-to-back losses, especially knockouts. Right. You shouldn't, but it happens. And it's happened these are not insignificant fighters who have been called upon to do this kind of thing. Randy Couture, guy, I don't know if the UFC has ever put him in the Hall. I mean, I guess he's in the Hall of Fame. He should be. But, certainly one of the best fighters UFC's ever had. Champion across 2 different weight divisions, one of the very few to ever do that. Frankie Edgar, Hall of Famer, one of the best champions UFC has had, certainly in lightweight. Jose Aldo is another one of these. We're talking about guys who are the very best of the very best. And when they got these, that was a little bit late in Aldo's run. That was not super late necessarily in Frankie Edgar's run. And, those losses to Benson Henderson are quite debatable, to be perfectly honest. Like, there was a lot of hype for Frankie Edgar when he went down to face Jose Aldo at 156 about what he could do. And again, he just lost twice, split and then unanimous. He didn't get whooped in that particular case. So that was a prime case where you're like, all right, finally this guy can do something with this. He can go out here and he can shine and can perform. And it simply just did not go that way. Aldo was simply too good for him. You know what I mean? So we're talking about guys who are, in John Lober, you couldn't really count as somebody, and Tank Abbott, you can throw them off the list because that's just sort of precursor early MMA. Then Yoel, that was just one of those sort of weird ones. But the other ones we're talking about are some of the very, very, very best guys to ever do it. It's very, very rare to put yourself in that position. That is true, which is why it hasn't happened very often. But just think about it logically for a second. Yes, are you being gifted an opportunity in a situation that probably shouldn't be happening under more normal circumstances? Sure. But the only people they're ever going to gift that to, certainly more in the, again, if you can discount Lober and Abbott, Yoel kind of lucked out because it's a heavier weight division. But for the most part, it's going to be these guys who are very, very, very good. Volk is one of the very best featherweights to ever do it. He might reclaim the title this weekend. They're not just giving it to some good fighter or even great fighter. They're giving it to a fucking elite one. They're giving it to an elite one. And so the point I wanted to make was, yes, you can do the 35-year-old. That's not a curse. It's just a stat line. He can break that. But it's to illustrate that for folks who are like, well, Volk's better than Diego, and I don't really know what to make of this fight and blah, blah, blah. It's to show him what he's up against in history. Not that this detail by itself is some kind of like the most important measurement, but it's not about Diego Lopes necessarily. I mean, yes, you're fighting Diego Lopes, but it's not about him per se. It's about he has found himself in a very, very unusual circumstance by virtue of all of the impressive work he's done before. And he's got an opponent that you would think on paper he should have some significant advantages over, but these aforementioned broader circumstances are enormous obstacles to success, to the point where historically it's never been done before. I'm not treating it like on par with the stat about his age. I think that one is a little bit more clarifying and interesting, and you've got a much wider sample to go by. But you're talking about an elite guy who gets an unusual opportunity because they're elite, and you're looking at an opponent who you think might be beatable, but because of these broader circumstances, to me, it adds much more depth and character to the achievement if he actually goes through with it and succeeds. I think that's what I'm trying to illustrate to people is that, dude, Volk can do something. I mean, forget the 35 thing. Just this alone to me would be absolutely insanely fucking impressive. Those other guys had to change weight classes to just completely reinvent themselves. And this is something kind of similar in the sense that the champion himself changed weight classes. But you're standing a post in this division against a very, very tough, I think technically overmatched, but tough contender. Dude, if you can beat a guy like that after getting stopped 2 fucking times, especially when you look at the history of who's tried it under, reasonably similar circumstances, it's just, to me, it adds so much depth and intrigue to the bout. I suppose your mileage may vary. I don't treat it as a hugely important stat line relative to the 35-year-old one, for all the reasons I just indicated. But I don't know. I feel like you're cheating yourself here a little bit if you're looking at this fight and being like, yeah, these things don't happen very often, and it's not a very big sample size. To me, I get all that, but there is still a historical milestone that could be achieved here. And to me, what that would say, independent of it even being Diego Lopes, if Volk were to emerge victorious, to me, I find very special and interesting. I suppose your mileage may vary. I wouldn't necessarily consider this to be like, oh, if he fails, there's some curse. Again, it is a smaller sample size. But what I was trying to get at was just, people being like, oh, Ilia's not there. How much, how interesting is this bout? Or, Diego's kind of overmatched, even no matter what the stat line might say. How interesting is this bout? For me, because of those other circumstances and what they mean historically, to me, it's added a whole new level of intrigue for me. And I already had a bunch to begin with, but I recognize not everyone's going to feel that way. With UFC 400 being in 2031 International Fight Week, what kind of a question is that? I don't even know how to answer that. All right. Let me see something here. Uh-oh. So Ariel and Don Davis are going back and forth? Ariel to Don Davis. You're in the midst of one of the worst PR runs in the history of combat sports. This is Ariel to Don Davis. You're in the midst of one of the worst PR runs in the history of combat sports. Hold on, let me pull this down. I can't open this app without seeing one of your top stars complain about the state of your company. I'm the least of your problems, but I take issue with you claiming my information is incorrect. Damn. Oh, here we go. Are you paying the same to the tournament winners? No, not even close. Did you ask Bellator fighters to rework contracts? Yes. Did you cancel events last year? Yes. Are you holding events at Universal Studios circa WCW in 1994? I don't even know what that is. Oh, the wrestling promotion. Thus generating little to no gate revenue. Yes. In fact, it continues to baffle me at how few tickets you're able to sell in America after all these years. I've asked you to come on my show, 5-6 times now, to talk about some of these things and your upcoming fights, and you continue to refuse. Why is that, Don? The only one who has been a disservice to the sport are the Johnny-come-lately promoters who think they can ride this MMA wave by convincing investors to gamify the fight game, season, standings, playoff. Nonsense. You know everything I said was true. Continue writing posts on LinkedIn to your current or potential investors. Surely continue talking about Fight Matrix. I'll continue to tell the truth. God damn. I mean, it's hard to disagree with any of that. By the way, PFL is so disdainful of that. I tried to interview one of their executives, and we set this up, and they just show up for a phone call, and it was over Zoom. And I was like, can we do this on video? And they're like, no. And then I wanted to rebook, and they were like playing games with it. And I'm like, okay, all right. You just don't want to do media. Like, okay, fine. You don't want to do media. That's fine. But then when they came to town, they're like, oh, you're going to come to the presser. It's like, are you going to give us one-on-ones? No. Okay. Well, then what the fuck would the point be of going to a presser? You can just air the presser on your YouTube channel. Why the fuck do I need to do that? They their audience is the boardroom. That's who they serve. They don't have a relationship to the fans. I don't make the rules, fellas. I don't make the rules. All right, here we go. Luke, considering that Islam refuses to fight Ilia on the basis that he feels that beating a 45er who has not proven himself in his division does nothing for him, would a fight between Arman and Topuria make sense, since Arman is ranked number 1 and UFC has said he needs to fight a number 1 contender for the title after pulling out in January? I mean, again, this is one of those questions on like what your matchmaking preference is. I don't necessarily have the strongest preference for that. That if he ends up fighting Charles, for example, and then fighting Islam and then winning, a showdown with Tsarukyan seems inevitable. So it's not like one of these fights you can just duck and dodge. But to me, if I'm the UFC, I'd be a little bit careful about how they matchmake him early here. And to me, I think giving him Tsarukyan right away, I don't know if that's the right call. Tsarukyan's still in his 20s. I think his game hasn't fully developed yet. To me, Topuria is much further along, which isn't to say that he wouldn't lose, but I just feel like he could, if Topuria were to win, you now ruin Tsarukyan a little bit. And if Tsarukyan wins, what was the point of Ilia dropping down? I would rather see a different fight for a number 1 contenders fight. However, I have heard people say that they would prefer this fight. They would prefer Tsarukyan to fight Topuria. So really, it's just a question of what your matchmaking preference and or values are. To me, I don't prefer it, but that's where we're at. All right. Okay. For years after his debut in the UFC, Michael Chandler has undoubtedly given fans must-see fights. But given the hard-fought battles and damage he's taken in order to do so, without actually seeing him at the top with lightweight gold, from your perspective, how should fans look at and remember Iron Mike's tenure and potential future in the UFC as we approach the Paddy fight in comparison to the anticipated potential future fans and the UFC had when he first arrived in the octagon? I don't think maybe he underperformed slightly. I don't think he underperformed all that much. Though to me, the big issue was the 2 years he punted away on waiting for Conor. Well, that was a mistake. That really hurt him. I more than the losses, I think that hurt him. Listen, he always had a style that could Michael Chandler's record, win-loss, be better if he dialed back some of the things he's done that were fun, wild, action-oriented for a safer, more strategic game plan and then fight, application? Could he have a better record? Yes. Relative to that expectation, he has underperformed. What I'm going to say, though, is does just winning fights, is that the best way to advance your career? How can anyone say yes? If you're Ilia Topuria or if you're Islam Makhachev, that's the kind of fighter, or John Jones, that's Tom Aspinall. That's the kind of fighter that can't really afford to take a loss, right? Where if you're directly in a champion or directly in championship contention, and for a time Mike was that, for a time. I think he's a little bit past that. And again, even in those title fights, did he over pursue Charles in the first one or whatever? But for a certain kind of fighter, winning is actually quite critical. But there's another kind of fighter that can actually do a lot for themselves by not necessarily doing that. And there's costs and benefits to that style too. It's not like there's one fit that works for everyone, or that even if it is the right fit for you, that right fit for you is right in all ways. But what I would say is the fact that Chandler was such a hyped signing and has maintained, at least, has Michael Chandler. Let me ask a question here. Let me see something. So Michael Chandler signed with the UFC after beating Benson Henderson at Bellator 243. So he fought at these are the fights that he's fought: UFC 257 or events anyway. UFC 262, UFC 268, UFC 274, UFC 281, UFC 309. He signed with the promotion in January of well, his first fight anyway was in January of 2021. Okay. The point I want to make is he's never fought in the Apex. He's only ever fought on numbered cards. I mean, there's a lot of very good fighters who have been around since that time who can't even say that. The fact that he is, and how many bonuses has he won? He got a performance of the night against Dan Hooker. He got fight of the night against Justin Gaethje, performance of the night against Tony Ferguson, fight of the night against Dustin Poirier, and then fight of the night against Charles Oliveira. So just that right there has been 300 grand, right? You know, not like a make or break sum of money in someone's life, depending on what your other purses look like. But do you see what I mean? He, to me, could have a better record. His record, to a degree, 4 of his last 5 have not gone his way, except that Tony Ferguson front kick is amazing. The 2 wins that he's had have been amazing. And he got very close against Charles, obviously, after defeating Dan Hooker. But I think it was a calculated call on his part to just fight the way he likes to fight, to reputationally perform a certain way, rather than trying to maximize every performance just to make sure that the ledger reads more W's than L's, or just to make sure that the maximum possible chance at a W. Again, I want to be clear. I'm not talking people out of like trying to do their best or fight more strategically. That's really not my point. But there will be cases that emerge where guys get promotional favoritism, where if they don't perform, as ably as they could in the most strategic sense, there could be other benefits conferred over the long term of that deal or their relationship to the UFC that could play very positive roles, and or the fighter in question might just like fighting that way. I think, honestly, Chandler just likes fighting that way. And if you win doing that, great. If you lose doing that, not great, but not the end of the world either, I think, in his mind. So, and also he came to the UFC at 34 years of age. That's already old at 55. The fact that he's actually got a couple wins along the way, he's lost twice to Oliveira and then Gaethje and Poirier. These are some of the best lightweights to ever do it. And especially in the case of Gaethje and Oliveira, at least they're some of the most action-oriented, tough fights. Obviously Islam and BJ Penn, won the full weight class title, but of this era, like real hammers you have to go up against. He could have a better record. He could. But then he just wouldn't. He just wouldn't be quite the promotional darling that he's been as a consequence. And you have to ask yourself, if you're him, what the appropriate trade-off is. Kind of a similar question here. What does Chandler actually gain if he beats Paddy? A win over a hyped and surging contender, which I think he could really use right now, and he could use that to get another really big fight with a top 5 guy. I think if he loses, he's looking at a very different set of opponents. Let's see. Here we go. Dean Thomas told a story on his podcast with Senko about how shocking it is that even many elite fighters don't do basic homework, like watching tape and going over fight plans in detail that coaches have created. Yeah, I've had many conversations on and off the record with Dean Thomas like that. I think he specifically told an old story about Poirier not doing this, though he might have changed since. Is this also shocking to you? It used to be. It's not anymore. I was never elite, but got to a decently high collegiate level in sport, and I can't imagine that kind of laziness, especially when your job and your mental, physical health are on the line. There is going to be one exception to watching tape that I think I've heard so many times in MMA and boxing that I take it seriously, not as a reason to not have it done, but let me explain what that is. I heard this from Seth Mitchell in boxing. I've heard it from, there's exceptions to this, but I've heard it from all kinds of guys who are very good MMA fighters and ladies too. They don't like doing either any or hardly any tape study, because what ends up happening is they then get mentally focused on what their opponent is going to do, and they kind of lose perspective. They end up negating that. Like they end up building a game plan, working on negating that without ever working on building their own strengths on top of it. It just ends up being one where you're just in service to what you presume they're going to do, what they're going to do to you, and never thinking about what you're going to do to them. And I take that seriously. I've heard it so many times. I cannot discount it. I accept it. What I would say, though, is the exceptions are, one, even then, I think a little bit of tape study in the off season is probably good for you. You know, even if it's not even your division, but people doing similar things, best practices, that seems important. Two, if you don't want to look at tape and you don't want to like game plan and strategize in that particular kind of way, your coaches need to. And then your coaches need to build the camp around these broad set of ideas, and then, you know, the specific tactical integration that goes with it. So if you don't want to like personally do it, you still have to have someone kind of be involved in that. Or three, you can just do what like guys like John Jones does, who watches tape aggressively. Like, this is what I mean. Like, you know, John Jones, again, personal stuff, put it to the side for just a moment, just as a fighter. And I'm not going to say like, oh, he's the exemplar of great habits, because we all know historically that's not been true. But like, you know, the fact that he has an extremely high fight IQ and he watches a lot of tape, to me, like, I don't see these two factors as disconnected or unrelated. You know, they seem to me very related. Like, tape doesn't lie. Like, dude, I'm telling you, if you like for XFC, it was so funny, man. I had to watch a bunch of tape for that main event, which was Kenny Cross and Lucas Corbaji. And Corbaji was, you know, his feet were not super fast. He does do a lot of movement, but his feet weren't super fast. 36 years old. He tends to like change stance very slowly. You know, he does employ lateral movement, but he didn't have fast feet. And Kenny Cross had, like, you know, was an explosive athlete who would dive into positions. And one thing that I noticed was he would take these big horse steps in open stance fights to the outside to create a punching lane for his left hand, whereas Corbaji would kind of switch stance to do it. You know, he would kind of step out to the side, then go this way, then step out to the side, then go this way. And there's many different ways to do it. I'm not saying one is more right than the other, but it's just there's tendencies, and there's the ones that work for the right reasons. And I had talked to Jessica Aguilar before the fight. I was showing her some of the stuff that she was looking at my notes, and I was showing her some of the stuff that I had seen, and we reenacted it with the stuff that I had watched in the fights, because I had all these detailed notes about it. Sure enough, 14 seconds into the fight, he takes a big, aggressive, quick outside step to that almost that kind of horse step to the outside to create a lane for the left hand, and he fucking sends the guy packing. Like, tape doesn't lie, dude. These guys, they can, you know, over time, if you see technical flaws, you have to be a little bit careful about how much they can clean that up. But a lot of times, if guys have offensive tendencies that you can see early in their UFC run, they might polish it, but they tend to keep a lot of that stuff. They tend to prefer certain things. They tend to react to certain things. They tend to see the field, you know, in very similar ways. The tape doesn't fucking lie. And so having good studies about that, and then to that point, developing a game plan around it, and you know, getting input from respected coaches and everything, I was like, this is, like, to me, critical ingredients of success. When I first learned that guys weren't doing this, I could not believe what I was hearing. But just rest assured, guys like John Jones don't do that. Guys like, you know, back in his day, George St. Pierre, they didn't do that. But guys like guys like BJ Penn, for a time, they would just, like, you know, I remember BJ Penn heading into the rematch with Matt Hughes. I remember they asked him, how are you training for this fight? And his answer, I'm not bullshitting, was surfing. He didn't give a shit about, like, any of that stuff. He's like, I'm going to march this guy down. I know exactly what's going to happen, because, you know, obviously he smoked him in the first fight, because BJ at his prime was extremely talented. But then look what happened in the second fight. He goes to hit octopus guard because, yes, he was very skilled, but, you know, he kind of tore his rib up and he gassed, and, you know, it was a whole mess. Like, there's been so many times he underperformed because he just didn't take that part of the game planning seriously. You go back and watch, remember that show that they would do, UFC Primetime, which was made like that was like their answer to 24/7, HBO's 24/7. And, you know, you'd see BJ and his team. This team was constantly trying to, like, corral him to train or to be on time or, like, all kinds of stuff. You know, like the ones who go really, 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 really far, they don't do that. But there is just this tendency in MMA to be, like, somewhat superstitious about seeing your opponent do things. That's one. And then second, you know, oh, I'll just get by on natural talent. And it's like, there's just a lot of, you can tell, man, there's a lot of guys who have good athletic gifts and maybe a proper mind for fighting, but weren't introduced to the concept of what organized sport looks like, organized coaching, organized preparation. they don't really have a sense of it. They don't appreciate how important it can be. And, in the end, they suffer long term. Again, I'm not surprised by it at all, but I can certainly say early in my run and covering the sport, I used to be like, how the fuck is that possible? It's just common. It's common. I don't think they're gonna make it, but let's go to this one. If the UFC decides to make Movsar Evloev versus Aaron Pico fight after all, thoughts on the matchup? Who would you favor? Greetings from Copenhagen. They're not going to make it, at least not right away. Movsar looks like he wants to be, as close to the title shot as possible. Pico is probably a bit of a distraction. To me, Pico is clearly rehabilitated. Clearly. To me, he's rehabilitated. To me, he looks extremely interesting. He's got dynamic power. We already know about the wrestling. And as long as his confidence and overall game integration is back, there's like almost nothing he can't do. But he's also unproven. He's unproven. He's like what he can actually do. We haven't really seen against an opponent the quality of Movsar. He's not beaten anyone that good. So, until he's actually beating guys that good, I will remain not negative, but certainly agnostic about it. You want me to have confidence in you. You either have to show something truly spectacular or you have to have done it already. And again, I totally commend Aaron Pico and his team for getting him back to this position. And now ahead of this UFC run, it's amazing. They did a phenomenal job. But I have huge questions about how far it can actually go. And this is where the rubber's going to meet the road. So like my gut would be, maybe Movsar wins. But I don't know. I don't know. I've seen a lot of people being like, oh, Pico's going to go in there and smoke him. And certainly he could. Certainly he could. But I would just be curious about like the source of confidence where that comes from. If Lopes goes out and ices Volk inside of a round, is the narrative going to be Lopes is him or more Volk is washed? It's going to be more Volk is washed. Now, there will be some people who will say, hey, maybe we need to give Lopes a little bit more of some shine, put some respect on his name. Amazing what he did. And again, it depends on how he wins too, right? Details matter. But if it looks like the reason that Volk loses is because his chin doesn't hold up, then it's going to be that. It's going to be that, which is not fair. And obviously, for the reason that anybody wins or loses, that can tend to be, more than just any one thing. But I also sort of understand it too. Listen, I'll say this. You said ice him in a round. If Volk went in there and just technically got beaten over the course of 2 rounds and then clipped and then finished off in the 3rd, that'd be different. But, if it's 50-50 or not much has happened and then one shot lands on Volk that's kind of errant and it sends him crashing and he gets finished off with this blitz from Lopes, yeah, it's going to be that he's washed. That's what it's going to be. And dude, that's why, again, one more time, this is why the odds are close. This is where the odds are close. On paper, it is, I don't know how y'all feel. It is hard for me to look at this on paper or at least on tape from what they've done. Now, again, the more recent tape on Volk's not that great, but, pick the Yair fight, right? The last win that he has. It's very difficult for me to look at that and be like, oh, yeah, Lopes is just better than him. I don't know what the argument for that would be. On the ground, in certain scenarios, sure, but overall, no. Like it's not super hard to figure that part out. It's just, can he survive in there given the state of things? I think that's why the conversation is going to be that way. And sometimes you get these, oh, so-and-so is washed narratives that are almost plucked out of thin air or really overstated. I don't think it's overstated in this one, assuming what you're positing happens, which of course it may not. But assuming that it does, I don't think it's all that unfair. That's why the odds are close. They're not close because people think Diego Lopes is technically on par with Volk. Who believes that? I mean, besides Diego and his team, maybe. But like most observers, certainly the odds makers, I don't think that they believe that. But He's got offense everywhere. He blitzes, he can overwhelm. He has got phenomenal finishing instincts and ability. And we don't know if Volk is really compromised at this point. That's why the odds are close. So if your worst fears as a Volk fan materialize and he just gets on the chin and then, he crumbles, I don't know how on earth you would avoid that narrative. I mean, that would be a relevant discussion to have. Let me just think about it this way. If you're in Volk's corner and you care about him and you're his family and he gets clipped and iced out a third time in a row, you have to have a question about your future there, bro. You know what I mean? How much longer you want to keep doing this? And if you're having the question of, again, if you get to that point, how much longer do you want to keep doing this? How is the conversation about them being washed not relevant? All right, let's see. Luke, how come Jones gets all the heat for the Aspinall fight not happening instead of Dana? Oh, we know the answer to that. The fans are willing to pay to see the fight. Tom is up for it. Jones accepts the fight for whatever he deems is a fair share of the revenue. Isn't Dana the limiting factor here, since he isn't willing to give up a bigger split of the revenue to Jones? This is a perfectly good question. So on a big, I can't say 100% yes, but a big portion of the answer is yes. We've been over this a million times. The fact that the UFC has historically not wanted to pay big purses has caused any number of issues with existing stars, potentially talent recruitment or, the like. And I've said it before, John wants $30 million for this. I think he is absolutely entitled to that. I don't have a single solitary problem with him getting that money. He probably deserves a lot more than that, if we're being honest. Dude, Canelo doesn't get out of bed for more. Dude, Canelo's guarantee, his guarantee is nearly $35 million. That's just to show up. That's got nothing to do with merch, concessions, gate, closed circuit, pay-per-view, all of it. He gets a cut of all of it. So he gets well in excess of that by the time, his paycheck arrives. Just for him to sign on the dotted line is more than $30 million. John is not asking for too much. I'm sorry to tell you that. He's not. He's simply not. But I don't even know what to say at this point. My question to the people who are like, well, hey, is Dana underpaying them? Guys, Dana underpaid. Well, it's not Dana personally, but TKO, UFC, whoever, they underpay the whole shit. Like, everyone is underpaid. I don't know what's hard for folks to understand, but like, relative to how the revenue should be distributed, they're all underpaid. Some more than others, but in the case of John, significantly so. However, what I would say is, did John sign a Project Spearhead card? Did he support that effort? Was he helpful at all for any of the efforts related to the antitrust suit? Has he meaningfully taken any steps beyond like sitting out or, whatever, to improve the material conditions of his own situation or any other as it relates to fighter pay? And if the answer is no, what the fuck do you want me to say? There's a lot of fighters who behind the scenes will tell me they don't like their pay or, my God, how unfairly I was treated. And then I'll ask him, did you sign the union card? No. Okay, well, I mean, what the fuck you want me to say, bro? You think complaining to me is going to do anything? It's not going to do shit. They're not going to. The UFC is not sitting around. People be like, wow, did you see what so-and-so said in the interview with Luke? Oh my God, what are we doing? Let's fix this. That doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. So I'm happy to say, the fact that the UFC wants to keep, I don't know how you want to describe it, but more money than is necessary to certainly reap enormous financial windfalls and also pay some of these guys greater purses that I think could facilitate making some of the bigger fights. I'm with you completely. But, unless they're willing on the back end to do anything about it other than just complain, I don't. Okay. All right. And then the other thing I would say is before, there's a thin line between, like, back in the day, there was a controversy, right? I don't know how it works anymore, but this was like, 2007 or something, a long time ago, where on the Underground, which was what was MMA.tv previously, I think now it's mixedmartialarts.com, there was the Underground was the forum there, and somebody was bitter at Lloyd Irvin at the time because he was charging $1,000, I think, like an hour for privates, or $1,000 for private, like some exorbitant fee. And folks were really bitter at him at the time for, like, how could this guy, how can you have the temerity to charge that much? And what he basically told everyone was like, I don't want to do privates. You know what I mean? I don't want to do them. I'll do them if if you're willing to pay whatever it was, $1,000 an hour, so some crazy amount. So if you're willing to pay it, I'll do it. But I don't want, like, he was straight up, I don't want to do them. There's a thin line between what you really want to do and pricing yourself out on purpose so that you don't have to do it. You can make a judgment about to what extent that is happening, and you could even say, oh, but how can he be pricing himself out if you think that he's entitled to it? Just because I think he's entitled to 30 million at a bare minimum, to be honest with you. But just because I think he's entitled to that doesn't mean that I think that the UFC sees it that way, which is really the ultimate arbiter here. So like what I consider to be fair, oh, he's doing what he considers to be fair. It doesn't matter it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. So among those three reasons, to me, it's like, yeah, let's make sure that we're assigning blame wherever it goes. But at the same time, unless you're willing to do something to materially improve your conditions, I don't know what you want me to tell you about complaining about fighter pay in media or just sitting out. Like, good luck, I guess, All right. Do I have time for one more on the free side? I would like to. Okay, here's an interesting one. I'll do this one. Do you ever get bothered that most MMA journalists / personalities can't talk about MMA in such detail the way you can? No. You can break down specific grappling techniques and fight strategy at a level of specificity even some fighters don't. If I were you, I would expect my MMA coverage peers to put that same level of dedication into their work. I will tell you what happened, and if this person wants to tell the public, I'll leave it up to this person. Last week, a former UFC champion, but I would say one still in contention to get it back, hit me up and said that they had liked, I don't know how recent the breakdown was. It wasn't super recent. I liked the breakdown I had done of one of their fights, and they wanted, I put it behind a paywall, and they wanted their own copy. So I sent it to that person, and they had a lot of really nice things to say. They loved my breakdown. He wanted to he told me he wanted to show it to his coaches because he wanted everyone to learn from it. And I was like, okay, cool. And this is someone who has been a champion and might be a champion. I mean, it's hard to say exactly they will be a champion again, but I would not rule it out. Like, still in a situation where that could happen for them, which was nice. It felt like a cool ego boost, for a moment in time. But I don't get bothered by it at all. First of all, I do the tape study because I always feel like I don't know shit. And that's insurance against feeling totally lost about something. My job when I do that post-fight show for UFC 314 this Saturday, my job is to be informed about it so that when you guys watch the show, you get some extra detail out of it. You can get something that just talking to any random old fan you couldn't necessarily get. But in order to get to that place, I have to do the homework and I have to understand this stuff. To me, it makes me feel, I don't know how to explain it, more whole. I can understand it better, but like, I don't have special powers, right? I don't feel like I understand this better than everybody else. To me, I don't feel like I understand anything ever. And I always just want to get information so that I could not feel that way. Second of all, you can do all the tape study and understand all the grappling exchanges and everything else in the world. And sometimes you can still miss the forest for the trees. and somebody else who doesn't can sometimes see these matchups more clearly than you. You have something to learn from everybody. You have something to learn from everybody. Yeah, of course, if someone knows a lot about technique and a lot about the fight game, give them the respect to listen to them. But sometimes somebody who doesn't necessarily know any of those things can still have a real clear understanding of how two guys might match up, or two ladies, whoever, a particular fight. They can just see things sometimes very clearly, and you'll miss it for any number of reasons that could be related to the fact that you have been watching fights for a long time and you have a certain way of understanding how two fighters match up that may not be as relevant as you think, and this other person can detect it, and they don't really know a whole lot about the fight game per se in that sense, the technique side of it, but they can just see it clear-eyed. Dude, it's happened to me it happens to me with BC all the time. BC will have a clear-eyed sense about things, not him, a lot of other folks. So no, I don't in any way ever feel, I take it as a source of pride that I can sometimes delve into that stuff, but I don't think it gives me special wisdom. I don't think it does that. The worst mistake you can make if you're trying to really understand a broad world and the world of fighting, whether it's kickboxing, jiu-jitsu, MMA, whatever. And jiu-jitsu, you can call it a fight, but I'm saying combat sports. If that's a thing you're trying to understand, the number one thing to get ahead is, in terms of what you think be humble as shit, or as humble as you possibly can be. It's nice when people appreciate your work. I appreciate that. I really do. I do appreciate that. It's nice when you feel like you can get stuff right ahead of time afterwards. That's cool. Certainly getting more information, I feel like, helps me to do that. But other people have different ways of seeing things you're just going to miss. And you don't know everything. When I say you, I mean the proverbial you. I don't know everything. I know very little in the broad scope of what there is to know, certainly. No. I take it with I'm glad there's a bunch of different people who like fighting with different ways of looking at it. You're going to learn something from all of them, for sure. All right, with that in mind, let's get to the paid questions. Oh my God, I can't breathe for shit. This is Nasacort. It ain't doing the job, brother. All right, let's see. First of all, let me do this. We'll leave that up. Again, one more time. This is for the Substack. If you're interested in learning more about that, that's where you're going to go. All right. Let's go to the top here. Jose Morales. Welcome to the party, friend. Alex says, why do you and others lump Chandler in with other great action fighters of the old generation? He was finished by Dustin and Charles. Gaethje fight was a unanimous decision. One of these things is not like the others. No, I couldn't disagree more. First of all, he's been around for quite some time. He's nearly 40 years of age. He'll be 39 this month. He's only done the last chapter of his career in UFC. He had a long one before that. His first fight with Eddie Alvarez, which, by the way, was the exact same day as Shogun versus Dan Henderson 1, is one of the craziest days in MMA history. If you've never seen that fight, go and watch it. And then do yourself a favor. Go watch Chandler Alvarez 1, then go watch Shogun versus Dan Henderson. I think they fought again, but 1. One of the craziest days in MMA history. But it's not just that. Michael Chandler is not the best fighter of his generation. I don't think anybody says that. But he has beaten good fighters a bunch of different times, to the point where I think he deserves to be treated on the level of a top 5 guy, perennial top 5 guy for quite some time. He is one of the best action fighters in lightweight history. And in fact, if you make a list, this is what people don't seem to understand. If you make a list of the best fights ever in lightweight history, the top 10, top 15, Chandler, Gaethje, and Poirier are, and Alvarez too, but those 3 in particular are overrepresented relative to their absolute achievements. Because, by the way, Dustin Poirier, never a full weight class champ. Alvarez was, but Gaethje was not. So you have Gaethje and Dustin Poirier. Yes, they got interim titles, but they were never full weight class champions. In that case, neither was Michael Chandler, and yet all 3 of them have some of the very best, most fun fights in the history of this division. People don't really understand that. It is absolutely fucking true. It is very, very true. So I don't put him on par. He got stopped by Pitbull too. I don't put him on par as the best one, but he's a top 5 guy. He's a tough out for all of them. Less so these days, obviously being almost 39 years of age at this point. But he deserves to be in consideration with this class of lightweights. There's some guys at the front of the class, some guys at the middle, some guys at the back. But for this class of lightweights, he deserves to be considered, obviously, among them. And what he's contributed, especially given his record of more recently, is remarkable. Rick asks, CIA says the COVID was a lab leak, end quote. Should Fauci be jailed? I don't know. Where are we on the we should trust or not trust CIA part of this? Where are we on this? I mean, listen, we've talked about everyone's, certainly I've talked about before, I think everyone to a degree, what we thought we knew at the beginning of COVID, what we thought we knew at the end of the pandemic, there's been a pretty big change. The one big change that I think everyone has to admit was at first it looked like, or I should say rather, at first it was treated as a blasphemy that it could have come from the lab. And now there appears to be some debate. Actually, there is significant debate about that. And there's lots of doubts that it was just, from the wet market, like that there is some real evidence at this point that it was, or at least it could have been, and maybe perhaps even was from a lab leak. I think, I leave that debate up to people who have really invested time into it. I don't really know how to answer it. I don't have a strong opinion about it, but certainly it was wrong back then to treat it like it was some kind of racist attack. That is not true. But as it stands today, I don't know. Are we on the believe the CIA part of the timeline? I don't know. Up to you. Ewan, is that how you pronounce it? Ewan says, confidence level in Madrid using their dark magic to reach the semis. Oh, fuck, brother. That was such a bad loss. As a Liverpool fan, there's zero doubt in my mind some stupid shit's going to happen and they will advance in the most ridiculous way. I will tell you, I'm actually not very convinced of that. Carlo Ancelotti, when the vibes are good, he's great, but he's not a technical magician. Camavinga had a terrible fucking game, but not just him. Declan Rice also, both free kicks were amazing. I actually think the second one was better than the first. But dude, that team, like the Madrid team, and listen, there are times where Bellingham can rescue them, or Vinny can rescue them, or Courtois could bail them out. But a lot of times that shit just comes crashing down. And that was one of those games. Is it possible Madrid can hang 4 on them or 3 and then, they can go to penalty shootout or whatever? I suppose it is possible, but I actually would not expect it. I would expect it to fail. They've got real big issues. Jose says, Luke, now that it seems his stardom has peaked, has there been another MMA fighter that did not speak English and refused to learn English and still reach the stardom that Poatan has? Silva would be the only example. He spoke English much later into his run. Much, much later. Remember the video where he was like, instead of saying I'm back, he was like, I back? He had already lost to Weidman at that point, twice, maybe even. Something like that. Or no. I forget which fight it was, but it was deep into his run. But long stretches of it had never done it, and he had sold a shit ton of pay-per-views. So yeah, him. This gentleman writes, Luke, you said you wanted to get into gaming and wanted recommendations. How has that journey been coming along? Not very. If I may, I'd suggest a game called Papers. It's very good. Okay, duly noted. This donk writes, plot twist. Dana was the investor that didn't fulfill his obligations to the GFL. He'll have a shirt this Saturday that reads, "Get effed, losers." Honestly, that might be kind of funny. I don't think it's true, obviously, but it would be kind of funny. Run Them Cheek says, where does GFL Collapse rank on your list of easiest predictions you've ever made? Maybe top 3. Top 3. Dude, the only thing that was ever surprising about GFL was like how long the media cycle of it kept going. I was like, when is this going to fucking die out? I mean, I guess, and then you realize, okay, it's not going to die out at this point until they just put the nail in the coffin. Like it just can't go on anymore, which we might be at soon. But I just couldn't believe that like there was oxygen to this thing. It just seemed, I'm not gonna go over it again, but you guys watch this live chat. You know how I feel about it. I put several videos up being like, this is a bridge to nowhere. And that wasn't even taken into consideration financing and everything. It's just a complete media / social media hype job. It is nothing else. What chance did you give Bisping to beat GSP? And what did you think his path to victory was? You had to, God, I have to go back and look at my analysis. I thought that I did not think that Bisping got lucky necessarily against Rockhold. Rockhold has had defensive lapses. He did make a mistake, and Bisping was there to capitalize. I mean, he was lucky in the sense that he took the fight on like 9 days notice, some like insane thing, you know. But what I did think was true was that even if he had the belt, I was not convinced he was necessarily the best middleweight. And I know Ant, who is part of my whole project here, disagrees with me, but I thought that a fight against Yoel Romero should have been made. It wasn't, blah, blah, blah. You know, we all know the story. He got to get the revenge on Dan Henderson, but it wasn't like, you know, that bill was going to come due against Whitaker or somebody else soon if he didn't get past St. Pierre. So I can't remember what my analysis was at the time, but I thought that St. Pierre had a very good chance to beat him, I think. What were the odds to that one? Let me look that up. So the odds on that fight, I'm going to guess St. Pierre was a modest to significant favorite. Let's see. Michael Bisping. Where were the odds on that fight? Yeah, dude. Bisping was a plus 450 underdog heading into the Rockhold fight. I mean, you cashed big on that night. Where was he against St. Pierre? Bisping was a modest favorite. He closed at minus 115. He started at plus 130. He closed at minus 115. Yeah, I mean, St. Pierre had been off forever, and so we weren't really sure. I don't remember exactly what my analysis was. I think it was probably leaning St. Pierre, but maybe someone can correct me and tell me. I don't know. Slewed Sauce says, explain the tariff situation. Oh, Jesus. Like I'm 24? The basic way to describe it is, oh, Jesus. I don't even want to talk about this shit. Dude, I don't, like, it's not like I don't want to talk about it at all, but it's just, there's nothing you can say to some of these people until calamity strikes, and even then that's not enough for some of them before you can even begin to have a conversation about what really is happening, about reality, about everything. You know, you just, it's not, you can't do it. It's not possible. You know, they're just, I mean, I hope that everyone can look around and realize that how fragile the world financial system is. If one human being can put tariffs essentially market wide, you know, right? Because it's everybody basically. You know, some carve outs here or there, but basically it's everybody. And still, you know, with China, it's still to an insane degree. And how dangerous this is. And they blinked because they saw what was happening in the bond market and what that would mean for the financial system, what that would mean for lending, right? They blinked. That's really what happened here. They threw up these tariffs. The market reacted terribly. I don't think that they cared about that so much. But then when Trump, who understands what happens, like, dude, Trump's understanding of the bond market by virtue of what he understands what businesses need for loans and what it means if you can't, you know, how it could affect lending. He knows that's a disaster, and he was like, okay, you know. And it turns out that, like, you know, Jamie Dimon of Goldman's was out there on Fox, and this was convincing to him. But you know, they put up a bunch of taxes essentially on doing businesses with all of these other countries, again with the dumbest formula ever. Trade deficit divided by imports, which just, you know, applesauce divided by 7 plus computer equals dog. I mean, this is just a nonsensical. It doesn't, like, it's a mathematical formula that literally doesn't even, divided by 2 doesn't even mean anything. It literally doesn't even economically mean anything. You know, and one person can just roil the markets this way. People think this is a good idea. I mean, yeah, the answer is going to be some of these people do. Some of these people do. Of course, you know, if Biden was doing this, who I am no fan of, but if he was, I mean, can you imagine the howling that would happen? right? The absolute fucking bedwetting that would happen. And now I'm expected to believe that this is like, oh, this is, this is all part of strategy. How can it be part of strategy if you blinked because it led to a situation that you recognized as looming financial catastrophe? That's the opposite of, we're bringing them to the negotiating table. But like Australia would be in a position where, you have certain countries where there's nothing you can do about the trade deficit, right? Trump seems to think that a trade deficit is like us getting taken advantage of in some of these various markets, when it's just a nature of the economic arrangement between what country is bigger and who we buy stuff from, and they don't necessarily have the same relationship back to us. It's just this is just the nature of the way in which commerce has gone. And it's not even necessarily one of like, oh, we're integrated on some sort of cheap supply line, like in like cases of very smaller countries in Europe or even Australia. Like there's nothing you can do. Like there's nothing wrong with there being a trade deficit by definition. There can be in certain circumstances, but not by definition. They're just treating it by it's an incoherent, reckless way to govern. I don't know how else to tell you that. And certainly conservative economy. I even saw Thomas Sowell looking old as shit coming out of retirement to be like, this is a bad idea. Like, dude, if you've lost Thomas Sowell and you're ostensibly representing his economic views, or at least some version of them, what do y'all want me to say? What do y'all want me to say? It's some of these issues I feel like it's important from my perspective to go to the mat on, but there's just a lot of people, and these are the ones that will accuse you of being deranged or having derangement syndrome, that they're just immune to evidence. They're just absolutely immune to it. They don't care about it. It doesn't mean anything to them. They'll spin it one way or the other, and they think that it's like laughable that you could think that like, hey, isn't Congress supposed to be in charge of tariffs? And isn't there like a really good reason for that? And the really good reason for that is like, one person shouldn't be able to do this to world markets on a fucking whim. That these kinds of powers, if they're exercised, have to be much more strategic and have to go through a more deliberative process in order to be unleashed on the markets. And they have to have like a really, specific kind of application. We're just going to fucking tariff the world. I mean, dude, who can think this is a good idea? Very, very, very confused people. Very confused people. Would you ever do a long-form video on Israel-Palestine? Sure. I got one. Well, it's not in the works yet, but yes. Maybe on Substack. It would only be on Substack. I just listened to Fear and Loathing in the New Jerusalem. Highly recommended. Very insightful. Okay. Very cool. You mentioned on MK on Monday that there is lots of John Fitch-style fighters in the UFC now. Which fighters were you referring to that have a laborious style? Well, we just talked about a Movsar would be one. Certainly a case like that. Lerone Murphy would be another. Merab is a guy like that. Merab has got, obviously, he's better than John Fitch. He achieved a full weight class title. He's one of the best bantamweights ever, but he doesn't have, he got to where he's got because he's got a special motor and got a sort of a fun character. But it's not like his style is like, John Fitch turned up to 11. It's not like it's a difference in degree, not kind. And there's just a bunch of guys like that all down through the ranks who are just round winners, but they're not bad fighters. Like Lerone Murphy, good fighter. Merab, good fighter. Grant Dawson, good fighter. He's got a little more submission ability, but things like that. Like there's just a bunch of them now. They're just round managers. And I don't blame them for it, but I'm just saying, what are we supposed to say? Like, we don't recognize that? Byron says, do you think anyone can ever be as big as the UFC? As long as there's no antitrust enforcement, it's possible in another industry. Or did the UFC just find lightning in a bottle with a tough finale in Conor? Well, they're talented promoters. They're talented promoters, but like once they've locked up the industry, there's nothing else anybody can really do after that point. So it'd have to be like a different industry. Ryan says, happy Thursday. Do you believe Sean, I'm assuming you mean O'Malley, could have done the work to change the outcome of the Merab rematch? No. That doesn't mean he won't win. But what it means is whatever was holding him back the first time, he had to have cleaned that up. And he seems to indicate injury and inability to properly prepare on the wrestling side because of injury were dominant factors. I think he can clean that up. Yeah. But like if that is not actually the reason, and then the actual reason was that there's a real big gap in skill on those dimensions, obviously not trading fists, but on those dimensions, 10 months or however long it's been, whatever it is not going to be enough time. No. Usman once said he wanted to go up to 205 and challenge Yuri and then fight Jan. Do you think he would have a chance against either of those two at light heavyweight? No, I don't. Too small. Usman was an amazing champion. Like, the other part too is like people. Well, let's see what he's got left. I'm not convinced he's got a ton left. People talk about him like there's a whole lot left. Could be true. Certainly, what he's already turned in has been extremely impressive. He's the second best welterweight of all time in my view. Close to being the first one, not quite, but close. But he's amazing. He's amazing. Very, very good. But 205 is a bridge too far. Connor says, I would love to see you do an interview with Andrew Huberman about fight sports and its correlation with CTE and TBI. Thoughts on him and the work he does. I've not watched much on him, in part because I was put off, not by the fact that he was there was that article that was like, oh, he dates a bunch of women and he's shitty to them all. And I'm like, well, that's not great, but that's not, like, what does it have to do about his science? But the thing that's actually been more interesting is that he apparently will endorse any product. And you're like, oh, well, don't you guys do that on MK? Well, actually, not anymore. And I know we had like an issue recently, but putting that aside, like there actually is a vetting process. Everything is great. The company is great. Everyone's doing a great job. But, he is a scientist. And my understanding, the criticisms that I have heard about him is that he is endorsing a series of products by giving his imprimatur as a scientist to it that are like total nonsense. Like, it's, you know what I mean? Like, and it's not just one product. It's like a dozen or more, like a bunch of them. And he's not just saying, hey, I'm a podcaster that you like. He's saying, hey, as a guy with a background in science and as a guy who knows science, you can trust the science in these. And I've read anyway, that is a thing that he does that is, disconcerting. However, on the other side, I've read that, he does have interesting discussions. He did have one podcast he did on sleep years ago that I listened to that was quite helpful. So, it's not an either or proposition, but it's just a little weird for a scientist to be like, he didn't do any of that kind of stuff. And then all of a sudden now he's doing a bunch of it. And he's, giving that imprimatur of science background to it. Look, why didn't the UFC invest in grassroots American MMA? I'm not sure what that means. They could have scouted top U.S. college wrestlers, put them in some of the top MMA gyms. I'm sure they would have had a few stars today. That's a question for UFC, man. I don't know how to answer that one. That's a question for them. Maybe they feel like they didn't need to. Maybe for a long time they didn't need to. Maybe for the longest time they didn't need to because, dude, wrestling was in trouble for a long time. We didn't know what its future in the Olympics was. There was a time where they were going to remove it. That was in the last, 10 or 12 years, it feels like. That was a big deal. They had so many wrestlers that were going already. Matt Hughes was there before the tough boom. And many others came afterward. Josh Koscheck, among a million other ones who were, D1 national champions or, All-Americans or just wrestled a lot at the high school and collegiate level. They're just, they felt like the UFC success was a recruiting mechanism for them. And that's not wrong. That's not wrong at all. That's a real thing. It's just a question of like, is that enough now where a lot of wrestlers are getting into professional grappling? A lot of them are, some of them are still getting into MMA, but they're just finding other jobs within the wrestling industry. And I think the wrestling industry has like paid a lot more now to coaches at the D1 level. D1 schools are paying more for wrestling coaches than they did before, as I understand it. So wrestling to a degree adjusted. They adjusted, especially for the elite ones. Like Jordan Burroughs, I know, was toying with the idea for a long time. But USA Wrestling kind of made it worth his while, changing the way compensation packages worked. And maybe it's time that the UFC then adjusts to that. But I don't know. I don't, does TKO care? Only they can answer. It doesn't look like they care a bunch to me, but I don't know. Daoud says, Watergate looks almost juvenile to what's going on now in the USA. The recent situation is nothing short of market manipulation. What do you think? I'll just say this. Again, I don't want to get too far down the weeds today because I feel like there's better things to talk about. But to me, it was unbelievable that the White House was out there putting out these claims like, you know, this is going to be a victory for Main Street over Wall Street. And then yesterday, the president has in his Oval Office and then shouts out, among others, Charles Schwab for making $2.5 billion in the market recovery, you know. And I'm like, how is that a victory for Main Street? How is any of this a victory for Main Street? Like, this is clearly a victory for the sell-off is not, but there's going to be select actors in his orbit who are able to take advantage of the bump. And it actually, I've seen some people indicate that there's evidence that there may have been some folks who knew that there was going to be this capitulation and a return, and then they bought or sold according to that. But it's like, you know, you're shouting out billionaires for making billions on a market recovery that, you know, has nothing to do with the average worker on Main Street. Like, there's of no tangible. I mean, yeah, the market's rallying is like a better economy is better for everyone else more generally, but it's nothing specifically anything to do with Main Street whatsoever. And you're shouting out billionaires in the office for making another billion, several billions of dollars, you know, on a totally artificial catastrophe that was created for no reason and can only be solved by apparently one person. Like, what? Like, it's just inherently totally untruthful and dishonest. Like, oh my God, like, I'm just begging people to like look around and like all the skepticism that you guys had for Biden, please apply that more universally. I'm begging you to be skeptical of power. Oh my Lord, man. Oh my Lord. Ideal opponent for Aaron Pico's UFC debut. I kind of thought Josh Emmett would have been a good one. I don't know if that's going to make sense anymore. Let me look up these rankings, see who we could have gotten. So at featherweight, you could do Ortega. Allen, I know he's got some business coming up. Murphy, I'd stay away from. Emmett, I like. Yeah, anyone from Brian Ortega on down, basically, is how I would. I don't have a strong, like, it's got to be that guy. Any one of those. How much could TKO's inability to market to Black/Latino fans affect their success? They seem unproven here, in my opinion. I don't know how to answer this question. The UFC over the last few years, with their hardcore political turn, has alienated a significant portion of what used to constitute the fan base. And of course, I think they've recruited on the other. We talked about this a million times. They've recruited on the other side, you know, a lot of more of what is left. And again, there's been this homogenization all the way down. They just don't seem super concerned. Now, at the same time, domestically, they don't seem super concerned with like making inroads into these various communities. Conversely, though, what I would say is look what they're doing in Mexico. They put a PI there. They're bringing multiple yearly events there. They're going to put a numbered UFC there, which is going to be a Noche UFC. So clearly, in terms of like growing that market, they're doing a lot. Like, you have to give them credit. But I just don't see. Again, you just have to ask yourself, does it look to you like those kinds of outreach efforts are things that they seem to identify as significant priorities for them? I don't know what that evidence would be, but I do see evidence that internationally growing those markets is kind of important to them. And that can have spillover effects long-term inside the United States. But yeah. Franco says, competed in a battle of the badges the last 2 years. Asked BC via Cameo for a play-by-play on the YouTube video of the fight they uploaded. I was asked to be a commentator this year as I got injured on the job and cannot compete this year. Any advice? I don't even know what the fuck Battle of the Badges is. Is this some kind of porn thing? Non-profit amateur boxing show. Policeman versus fireman. Okay. I asked BC via Cameo for play-by-play on the YouTube video of the fight they uploaded. I was asked to be a commentator this year, and I got injured on the job. They cannot compete this year. Hey, listen, man. Go do it. This is not an audition to be a commentator for some major promotion. That's not what this is. It's not that at all. So who cares? Just go have fun. I mean, you could practice a little bit, try to talk in a way that is helpful but limited, and then just go have fun. Like, don't take it too seriously. It's an amateur event that's designed what appears to be for charity. Go have fun with it. Who gives a shit? Would you agree that Ortiz Jr. is the top dog at 54? Maybe. I think Ortiz Jr. looked great against Madrimov. He definitely looked great against Madrimov. He limited Madrimov's movement and footwork, and his guard manipulation and tricks were skillful. Totally agree. He did better than Crawford did. Now, Crawford isn't necessarily a true 54 guy, but yeah. Virgil Ortiz Jr. is the man. Saul, my man. What's going on, brother? Jereem May says, should Patchy Mix make his way over to the UFC? What do you think would be... Oh, should he make his way over? What do you think would be his most likely path to a victory against each of the current bantamweight top 5? All right, so top 5 would be Davison Figueiredo, keeping it on the feet and outstriking him if he could, or taking his back, but that's going to be tough. Sandhagen, taking his back. Umar, that's a tougher one. You have to negate the takedown, and you have to hurt him. That's a tough one. Jan, taking his back. O'Malley, taking his back. And then Merab. I mean, he's trained with Merab. I don't know if that fight would even happen. But the other ones, it's a combination of back holding. Honestly, I'm being dead serious about that. Or absolutely avoiding the ground altogether. It will be funny watching Dana dump on GFL at 314. I doubt he cares that much. I mean, I'm sure he will if he gets asked about it. But it's like me. It's like I didn't even have strong feelings about it because I'm like, you know what I mean? Like, I never had to think twice about it because it was so obviously fugazi, you know? Hugh says, does Ilia go back to featherweight with a loss at lightweight? Unlikely. Possible, unlikely. Bildo says, are you any good at 4D chess? Because I'm seeing Trump's moves and they all look quite dumb to me. Tell me what I'm missing. Yeah, I don't quite get it. I think people are trying to like, there's a lot of people who do like, who claim to be like Trump speak guy and, you know, they can like translate what it means into like academic language or some kind of ideas about the world and synthesize different things in ways you hadn't considered to kind of dress up what he's doing. And I think just the more realistic explanation is that this is a guy that's believed since the 80s in tariffs. There's evidence that he, on the record, he loved tariffs all the way back then. He wanted them on Japan and just thinks, despite having economists explain this to him over and over again, that yes, you can use them like any other policy tool. You absolutely can, but it requires a boost to domestic industry. It requires targeted tariffs. It requires a long-term project. It requires, it has to be done thoughtfully and carefully, not just, we're just going to fucking spray the block, like a drive-by and see who dies. Like, it just doesn't work. I mean, but dude, if you say this, oh, I think we should listen to economists about this, they'll just tell you, you got derangement syndrome, right? Now that Volk has outed himself as another UFC fighter who's cool with rapist scum, can I finally stop pretending he's funny and a legendary talent? Who is this? Oh, fuck. Is there something that I'm missing? Yo. Oh, Jesus. Am I missing something? Did he do something I don't know about? Well, I mean, I don't know what to say. I don't know what to say. I genuinely don't know what to say. JP says, do you think an Elon Trump blow up is inevitable? Yeah. I saw Elon ripping Trump's guy Navarro. Do you see Navarro has mentioned that there's an economist that he references all the time, going back years, by the way, including more recently, but all the way years. And it's actually not a real person at all. It's just an anagram for the word Navarro. And he has said oh, economist so-and-so. Imagine I said there's an economist named Eagle, and it's just Luke spelled backwards. Oh, economist Eagle, who's a PhD at the University of Chicago. You'd be like, dude, what the fuck is wrong with you? That's what he's doing. That's who's in charge of the country now. So I hope you're happy, everyone. Look, why haven't you gotten as excited about kickboxing, Muay Thai as you are about MMA? One could argue Muay Thai striking is a higher level and more exciting than MMA. It definitely is. Pure forms of striking are almost always better than MMA. Like actual wrestling is better than MMA wrestling, and sport jiu-jitsu is better levels of jiu-jitsu, but that's not the point. The point is that when you combine them, you get something different. And I have just tended to, not always, tended to prefer the mixing of them. We've kind of been over this one. Why Trump imposed tariffs? Because he's just got weird ideas about how tariffs work. I would like to tell you that the leader of the free world, such that we can even call it that anymore, has like some grand vision and understanding about it all, and that's just simply not the way that it works. He has bad ideas, and he acts recklessly, and we're all at the mercy of it. It's not more complicated. It's just not. He has, dude. There was reporting that was verified that he had economists from a number of different agencies and departments that helped carefully draft formulas, real formulas, for what the tariff should be for all the countries piece by piece. And he threw them all away for trade deficits divided by imports divided by 2. Shoelaces divided by nasal spray plus 7 equals cherry blossom. Like, just gibberish. You had professional economists go painstakingly, piece by piece, to give him exactly what he would need to have a targeted, thoughtful way of doing tariffs, and he just threw it away. Y'all want me to get on here and shout fire and brimstone? All it's going to do is just piss people. I get people who write me after one of these being like, "You're so unfair to him," and I'm like, I don't think that I am. I think that the amount of grace that is given to this guy doesn't match what the evidence tells us about his judgment. Anil says, casual football watcher. Never expected Arsenal to decisively beat Real Madrid. Yeah, you and me both, brother. And never expected Barcelona to be at the top of La Liga. Oh, they've been at the top of La Liga a million times. I mean, that's not all that interesting. But watching Mikel Arteta just have his way with Real Madrid was not, as a coach anyway, not fun. Does Aaron Pico's team hate him? Far from it. As talented as he is, historically his career has been mismanaged. And for his first fight in the UFC, he gets an absolute hammer, Movsar. That's not happening. Terrible matchmaking, in my opinion. A, that's not happening. And B, no, I don't think that they hate him at all. I think he probably knew if you're going to go to the UFC, you're going to have to fight who they give you. And they rebuilt him from a place that I don't know many teams could have rebuilt him. So I actually give them a lot of credit. Dave says, Luke, you said 135 needs Nunes versus Kayla to give the division some juice. Is there value in having Kayla hammer some donks first, or do you set it up ASAP? She's 34 years old. No, if she beats Nunes, if she beats Pena, you make it next. There's no need to wait. Austin says, does Charlie Olives have one more run for gold left? Unlikely, but possible. How does he get there with the current state of the lightweight division? He's got to beat maybe just one more good one. He's not, well, then he'd have to be who the champion is, but as long as Islam is the champ, I don't think he does. But if that changes hands, then it's possible. Albard says, who do you think is the next big prospect in MMA who is a Mexican national and why? Note, I mentioned Mexican national, so Diego Lopes does not count. The next big star? I'm not sure who the next big star out of Mexican MMA would be. I mean, I know who some of the bigger figures are now. Lazy Boy is good, but not good enough to be like the next big thing. Not here anyway. Oh, they had that one kid. Hold on. Who looked kind of interesting to me. I'll tell you what. I don't know if he's the next big star, but a guy who caught my attention, I'll put it that way, is this kid. His name is David Martinez. David Martinez looks to me, the Black Spartan, he looks to me like a really interesting guy. He does have a loss all the way back in 2021 via split to Gianni Vazquez, but has since then not lost. He won on the Contender Series and then looked awesome against Simon Oliveira. I don't know if he's going to be all that great, but he looked kind of interesting to me, and he seems to be an interesting prospect. How did you feel as your UEFA Champions League hopes went to the land of wind and ghost as Rice bends it like Beckham to the top corner. Yeah, boy, the I gotta tell you, all the dunking that Real Madrid has done on the world comes back to you when they lose, and they lose badly. Yeah, it sucked. It sucked. And actually that night I went to a baseball game. I went and saw the Nats versus the Dodgers. It was so freaking cold in that stadium with a buddy of mine, and my buddy is a Arsenal fan, and he was rubbing it in my face too. Welcome to the party, sir, or lady, whoever you are. Can I get your thoughts on Morales versus Burns fight? Gilbert is the more experienced and skilled vet, but is a bit long in the tooth, and Morales is very raw but talented. Amazing matchmaking. Obviously, Morales has not beaten anyone the level of Burns at all, but to your point, Burns is like, I think, 38 at this point. He is certainly quite old. Morales, to me, has I mean, from a skill perspective, I think Burns is much better, but I'm always just going to lean youth. So I'll lean towards Morales, but I love that fight for what it proves, what it shows, what it can be, you know. Austin, who gets Charlie Olives next? Hopefully Ilia. Okay, we're doing a bunch of these. Let's kind of keep these. If you are a member, you can definitely ask at least 2 questions. When we get to 3 and 4, it becomes a problem. I got to get through all these. Will there ever be a pendulum shift in MMA grappling back towards offensive jiu-jitsu compared to the wrestling dominant focus of the past 7 years? Yeah, momentum swings happen all the time in terms of technical proficiency or meta game, but I don't think it's ever going to get back to what it was in its glory days, but it could attain new kinds of prominence, just not the old kind. Luke, money not being an issue, do you have a favorite type of restaurant? Easy answer. Hole in the wall, elevated casual, or high end. So I've eaten at Little Washington. This was 18 years ago. I don't know what it is now. 18 years ago, it was $350 a person. I went there one time for my sister's birthday. One of the best meals I've ever had. Wouldn't go back. Unconventional Diner. I can't say enough good things about Unconventional Diner here in DC. I went back to them. It's on 9th Street. 9th or 11th? I think 9th. I went Northwest. And I went back to there and I had, what did I have this time? My wife had the chicken parm, which was unfucking believable. And I had the Moroccan fingers, and I had, what was my main? Oh, I had their cheesesteak. Oh my God. Oh my God. It was awesome. I couldn't recommend it more highly. Or the pupusas, which you can get those at DC United games for a few bucks. They're amazing. Here is listen, I have been lucky to travel the world. I have been super lucky. I haven't seen every corner of it. There's many beautiful parts of the world that I want to go see. Argentina's at the top of that list. Korea's at the top of that list. Thailand would be on that list. Australia, lots of places I want to go see I've not seen. But I've seen a lot. And I will tell you what my favorite place is. It is not fine dining. Fine dining is cool, especially if someone else is paying for it, but that's not what I like. What I like is much, much different than that. What I like is when you go to a place that serves dishes that have cultural heritage, and the place that you're going doesn't serve a bunch of stuff. They just kind of serve those dishes with cultural heritage, right? That's what I like. I think, you can get those reasonably priced, and you get families that have been doing it for generations. That to me is basically as good as food gets, and it's my peak experience. All right. Willie says, do you ever watch the Majority Report, Sam Cedar? On occasion. Yeah, it's just, every clip is 49 minutes, and I'm I don't have that kind of time. And I think he's hilarious, though. I love him. Any advice for someone struggling with their mental health? Again, you can struggle in different ways, but the answer has to be you have to seek treatment. You have to do 2 things. 1, take care of yourself physically, getting good sleep, getting exercise, getting outdoors, making social connection. And you have to talk to somebody about it. I mean, you don't have to talk to somebody about it. I suppose it's not, but I strongly recommend it. You cannot hold these things internally. I'm going to just get over it by force of will. You're going to learn all the wrong lessons from doing that. Alan W. says, different strokes for different folks. As long as the coach is doing his job and studying, it's fine. All James Toney did was spar. Yeah, James Toney is also one of the greatest fighters of all time. But we're not talking about that. We're talking about guys who could be a lot better if they put in a little bit more best practices. Also, James Toney had amateur experience. A lot of these guys don't. Eric, just gifting out memberships like a mensch. Thank you. This gentleman writes, do you feel that Yair is improving or stagnating? Gonna find out. Gonna find out. Gonna find out. Joe says, you have to talk about Trump seemingly turning on tariffs overnight. This administration is legitimately redacted. Truly, what are we doing here? So let's get some bits from Joe. I'm not going to go over it again. I appreciate the donation, but don't listen to me. Listen to what economists say. Listen to what any don't listen to left-wing economists. Listen to right-wing economists. You know, and not ones inside Trump world. Ones that like still work at some kind of institution, even a think tank. See what they say. They don't love it. They don't love it. Anil says, seeing the behavior of this U.S. administration and the comments by the fans of Trump, I hope the Chinese century becomes a reality. Well, you know, doing everything possible to de-dollarize global trade and commerce and the international financial system, probably going to help that. I think I've become a Latina convert. God help me. He will. He will. God help you, Joe, for not having to slam flat asses anymore. That's hilarious. Warm empanada. Barely watch MMA anymore, but love the live chat, LT. Thank you, my friend. Welcome. Thank you for being here. Mike says, will UFC sign Vadim Nemkov? I hope, but he's Fedor affiliated, so I don't know. How will he do at light heavyweight? He could be champion. Any updates on Patchy Mix? None. Kind of been over that one already. Luke was watching Evil Dead recently, and it dawned on me how much Bruce Campbell and Brian Campbell look alike. Have you ever seen them in the same room together? Because I have some suspicions. Can't say that I have. No. From Sean, being Irish, every country in Europe generally hates their politicians. Any person who makes their political beliefs their whole personality is a fucking loser. Thank you so much. Why are they idolized in the U.S.? It's a fucking cult. And you see some of it on the left, too. Not as much. Obviously, the Trump cult is its own little special category. I just don't understand it. It's like, dude, again, challenge to everyone. When do you ever see me talk nice about the Democrats? When do you hear me do it? They're fucking servants, public servants, you know, and spineless ones at that. But beyond that, you know what I mean? Like, you don't ever hear me talk nice about those people. You don't ever hear me talk nice about them because they're fucking losers. I don't talk nice about any of the elected politicians. I like some more than others, but even the ones I like, I got a lot of problems with. Like, it blows my fucking mind how hard this is. These people, like, it's because they don't have the traditional relationship to them. Like, oh, I look at this guy as a public servant who's here for a short amount of time, whose policy ideals I like. I mean, there's some of that involved, but it's certainly more than that. It's more than that. It's got another special thing going on. Like, he's some kind of divine figure of restoration. You know, there's a different level of attraction there. And it's, you know, God help us. If you and BC owned the rights to MK, would you run all your programming through it in a coordinated effort, or would you still want a separate channel? I'd still have a separate channel. You could even add Li Luke's Locks of the Week. We would maybe do other forms of programming, but I would still keep the channel. 9:15 a.m. Your breakdown of Joshua versus Ruiz is what hooked me. Sweet. Thank you. Does Ilia leaving the division lessen Volk's big accomplishment if he wins? No. I mean, it would make it much bigger, but it would still be big. He didn't have to beat the guy who he just lost the title to. That's true. It's true. But it would still be big. Has your 401k recovered mostly? I heard the market bounced back. Hope you didn't lose too much. It didn't recover fully. No, it didn't. Like, people don't understand the math on this. If it loses, if you're at 100 units and you lose 10%, now you're down to 90. If you gain 10% back, you only gain 9% or 9 units. So no, you're still down. It's like that. Is the best way for Sean or anyone to beat Merab to throw caution to the wind and go all out in the first 2 rounds? Or how else can you see Sean winning? I would say, like, I'm not going to say, yeah, a little bit of this. A little bit of this. You might get taken down. That's true. Like, you have to be a little bit more selective about it. But he's not going to finish you on the ground. To me, it's about creating separation. That's what you should really worry about, is separating the hands, finding ways to stand, finding ways to get off the fence, and then having a little bit more of a risk approach. Because as long as you can do that, you're in business. Have you watched the Fighting Nerds documentary that John Gooden did? I've not. Would highly recommend it as it helps understand the principles that make them such a good team. Okay, I'll do that today. Felt real bad for Olynyk and BKFC. Name of the game. Yeah, dude. When you're at the bottom of the, when you're at the end of your run and you're just fighting for money, like terrible shit happens. Terrible shit. Bleak. What do you think is more likely, Volk beating Lopez or Ilia beating Islam by finish? I'm assuming you mean both by finish. I think probably Ilia beating Islam by finish. It's a much tougher thing to do. Rick Donkerson says, long-time supporter. Just want to say the Substack channel has been great. Thank you so much. Hope you keep it up. Thanks for the content. Palestine Hura. I don't know what Hura means, but Palestine obviously is another way of saying Palestine. BMAC says, after the Green fight, you were more confident in his upside, but aren't his other fights a better indication of where he is at? And that was an anomaly. Talking about Paddy. Well, this is what I mean. Chandler is another level. Let's see. But even what he showed in the Green fight surprised me. Like, I didn't think he even had that in him, and he clearly did. Yoel Romero was banned and wasn't available to fight Bisping. Read Bisping's book. It was all there. Hendo at 7 was top available contender. He was banned eventually, but there was a window where it could have happened. Dude, I had a discussion about it on Michael's fucking SiriusXM radio show. We had a discussion about it. Like, I remember this vividly. It wasn't banned the entire time. Alan says, go ask the average citizen how tariffs work, and it looks like an episode of Are You Smarter Than a Fourth Grader? Yeah, dude. A republic, if you can keep it. If you can keep it. It'd be great if we had checks and balances. It'd be great if we had checks and balances in government, this person writes. Yeah, I know. We do, actually. They just don't seem to use it. Last question, if I may, for Luke. If Ngannou was to never fight in MMA again, what would his legacy in the sport be, in your opinion? Something of a trailblazer to a degree. An important figure in UFC heavyweight history. I think you could say that. A dynamic knockout machine. A guy who took a bunch of risks to achieve and took some L's along the way, but ultimately was able to get a lot out of the fight game in terms of, like, what's the goal of a prize fighter is to get prizes. Big pay. I don't know if he holds any special significance as like an all-time champion or whatever, but I think, what he did in signing with PFL and getting into boxing and whatnot, like, that's an important contributor. And like, his overall story is remarkable as well. The day of your death and not one day earlier, would you rather get frozen to death, boiled alive, or made love to death by an 8-foot penis walrus? I think probably frozen. Thoughts on Dr. Mike? I appreciate his work in vaccine advocacy. I'll say that. Henry says, do you think we'll see an elite boxer or MMA fighter who will fight well into their 40s again? Yes. What made Bernard Hopkins and Randy Couture so special? Different things, obviously, but some guys are just going to have greater athletic longevity, partly due to smarts, partly due to good defense, partly good the ability to change weight classes at opportune times. But, Luka Modric is basically, I think, either 40 or nearly 40, and he's, he shouldn't be starting for Real Madrid, but he can still play off the bench. Like, athletes are just getting older. It's just a thing that's happening now. Hamza, welcome. And thank you. Yeah, I know who you meant. For Othman's Reese's Peanut Butter Cup Fund. Thank you. That's a deep cut. Albert says, could you please answer one of my questions in the free section, the Mikey Musamechi? If you command F Albert Espinoza, you should be able to find it. All right, let's see. Albard. How did nobody... It's not coming up, bro. I'm not doing a bit. It doesn't come up. Yeah, I'm not seeing it. It doesn't come up. You can email me. Just email me. It doesn't come up. What do you think Alexa Grasso's regression has anything to do with Diego Lopez's meteoric rise as a featherweight contender? No. Do I think they're related? No. And perhaps not being able to focus as much on her BJJ training? No. I don't think that's a relevant factor. Does the depth of your breath overturn the apple cart. To say nothing of your mileage possibly varying, I ask you to stay frosty. Now let's bang pornography. All right, skits and bits. As someone balding in my early 30s, I'm jealous of the amount of hair you have maintained going into your late 50s. Not late 50s, fuckers. I'm 45. That's a good joke, though. Why is the backlash against Bryce, speaking on past events, way bigger than what other fighters have actually done? Criminals like John and Connor. Some things capture the media's imagination more. Some things capture the fans' imagination more. Like Greg Hardy obviously got treated like, I'm not mad at it, but Greg Hardy got treated like crap because of his past, obviously. And there's other guys who have just as bad, if not worse, that nobody cares, So it's just weird how sometimes things bubble up more than the other ones. But yeah, there you go. Guys, it is Autism Awareness Month. So if you see Ant in public, be nice. Be nice. Be nice. If Volk wins this weekend, how long do you realistically think he will keep competing at the highest levels? 1 or 2? Yeah, not much longer. Not much longer. Not much longer. Winning this would be such an important achievement because for any number of reasons. But if this goes poorly, it certainly hastens the exit. And even if he wins, it delays it a little bit. But I don't think it's a whole lot of time left. And I am literally autistic. All right. Out of curiosity, do you lift for size or strength, or do you do a mix of rep ranges? I lift for strength, but not absolute strength, just like functional strength. I'm doing more push-ups now than I've ever done even during my time in the military. I do more push-ups now than ever. You know what I mean? Like functional movement patterns, functional things that I need for my life. Like picking up max weight. I don't do that anymore. Ronnie says, I presented on the UFC antitrust lawsuit in my 3L completion law class. Now there are 24 law students who care more about fighter pay than the fighters themselves. LOL. Send me that. Send me your presentation if you may. I would love to see that. Amazing. Okay, we're doing autism bits. What are we doing here, guys? Terrence says, colleges are down enrollment. Are we seeing a downfall of traditional colleges in the U.S.? I don't know enough about this to speak. We are being less educated as a nation. That is certainly true. What consequences do you think this will have on future generations? Like, what is the consequence for, a polity and a society to be less educated and therefore less able to make informed decisions? I mean, the downstream effects of that are total catastrophe. Do I need to say that? That's total catastrophe. Absolute, unbridled, total catastrophe. But I did see that there was massive influx to certain law schools for applications. So that's true and not true. For your cultural heritage, durian fruit. I'm told it smells quite bad, but they sell it in Chinatown in New York. Ben says, unironically, want Volk to start a music and or comedy career after he's done fighting. My God, that man is entertaining. He's got a future post-fighting. Doubt that, but I agree that the skits that he's been involved in have been great. Aston says, will Jayon Silva survive Bryce's poltergeist attempt? That's the central $1 million question, is it not? I tend to think Bryce is going to win that one, but I'm not super confident about it. BC's Feces, ACDC, I drive a Mitsubishi Vulcan 5. All right, Johnson, thank you, sir. Christian, P.S., we should be together too. All right, it's getting a little weird here in the chat, but we're going to plow through. Fifi, Ant referred to Volk befriending the Tates. Oh, I did see that he greeted one of them. Was there more to the story there? I don't know what the full story is there. Is that really like he does support them? I don't know. I'll have to look at it. I don't know. O'Malley, Marab, Kayla, Pena, Presser could be good. Yeah, that could be fun. Yeah, I agree with that. Is Mbappe doing good towards the end of the season? He was bad at first, and then he really picked up steam, and he's kind of fallen off a little bit more recently. I know there's been talk of yet another trade for him. There's not going to be a trade for him. Not anytime soon. Okay. Thank you for this. I cannot believe one question didn't get asked about the Ali Act. So now I'm going to have to make a video for that. Be on the lookout for it. Also, for folks here, Fight Day broadcast tomorrow. Join this to find out. For paid subscribers only. There's the only way to do that. All right? Right here. Use your QR code here and join up. Okay. I'm out of here. Thank you guys so much. Reminder, watch along and post-fight show for UFC 314 this weekend. Love you all. We're out of here. I think there's one more. Hold on. Does Volk retire if he gets knocked out viciously? I think so. Or I think at a bare minimum, he should. He should. All right. Thank you all. We're out of here. Until next time, stay frosty.